Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ashley Griffin, a Broadway performer, writer, and theater journalist. This is my co-host Poppy. Say hello. We all love you. Poppy's not in spooky season yet, but that's okay. If you're new here, welcome. Don't forget to click the subscribe button for more content from your theatrical Hermione Granger. So let's get started. Can you walk like Frankenstein? Can we walk like Frankenstein?
Go walk like Frankenstein.
What's up there?
Go walk like Frankenstein. Walk like Frankenstein.
He did a mash.
I'm sorry.
We love you, Poppy. Do you have anything special to say to our viewers? Because they love you. Oh no, she says no more. And we always listen and give consent. I mean, listen to consent. I'm fine. I enjoy this shirt. It's kind of like a Halloween costume without fully being a Halloween costume. And sometimes it sums up how I feel. I am horrified to say that Hermione Granger that I am, I didn't know what the story of Frankenstein really was until well into becoming an adult. Now that I do, it's one of my favorite stories of all time, and with the new film adaptation by Guillermo del Toro about to come out that claims to have the goal of being much more faithful to the original source material than previous adaptations, I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about what the heart of this brilliant work actually is. What most people tend to think of as Frankenstein is the 1931 film starring Boris Karloff, which is a fantastic film and is so influential that almost all adaptations, retellings, and parodies of the story have really been adaptations of the 31 film. Young Frankenstein is a perfect example. And viewed as a loose reimagining of Frankenstein is great. I think we should have room for all kinds of reimaginings of stories. They can all coexist and we can get different things from each of them. But we're here to talk about the original story. So let's start by taking a look at what we've come to think that story is. The 1931 film's primary function was to save the floundering Universal Studios by competing with what was an incredibly successful film and style of film of the time, the horror adaptation of Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. Nowadays, the films of Frankenstein and Dracula are considered part of a very specific film genre, along with The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera. Think the attempted Dark Universe franchise and the, at least at this moment, successful theme park based on that not super successful franchise. Even though they were made by different studios and by different people. And that's because this style of film horror, separate from the Gothic style of many of the books, which certainly obviously heavily influenced those films, but is kind of a separate genre, can be traced back to the beginning of cinema and the work of Lon Chaney. Chaney had become famous as an actor and makeup artist, specifically for being able to disappear into extreme characters with incredible realism, such as the deformed Phantom in The Phantom of the Opera, or the deformed Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Are we sensing a theme here? At a time when special effects were, I guess we might say, limited at best, I would say literally just being invented, Chaney was able, with some prosthetics and costuming, to pull off out-of-this-world physical transformations that created realistic portrayals of the seemingly most unrealistic characters. Think the 1930s version of master actor and physical performer Doug Jones. Yes, all of these characters were played by Doug Jones. Or the incredible work of Andy Serkis. Only Jones and Serkis were giving their performances using state-of-the-art special effects makeup, costuming, and technology. Chaney was working within the limits of what was available literally when film was invented, and that's including coming up with technical advancements of his own. Chaney's style forms a direct link to Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Lugosi had actually hoped to play Frankenstein in the 31 film, but instead was instructed to play the creature. For a variety of reasons, Lugosi left the film, a move which some regard as one of the worst decisions in any actor's career. And the role of the creature went to talented actor Boris Karloff, who also portrayed Imhotep in the 1932 The Mummy. The entire Dark Universe centers on the work of Karloff, Lugosi, and Chaney in a very specific style, which Chaney largely invented, so much so that it's easy to forget those roles, namely the creature, Dracula, the Mummy, and Quasimodo, although I don't believe Quasimodo is as much a part of the Dark Universe, weren't all played by one person. Karloff's performance was so much the center of the 1931 film that people assumed the movie was named for his character, hence the almost 100 years confusion about who Frankenstein even is. FYI, Frankenstein is the scientist, Victor Frankenstein. His creation is known as the creature, or in some instances, Frankenstein's monster. The whole film was meant to capitalize on the popularity of Chaney Lugosi's kind of horror film and help Universal, which was seriously struggling financially. It was heavily influenced by the idea of a Lugosi type, or even Chaney type, in the central role. Chaney's performances were also primarily silent. He originally made his name in silent films, and along with the heavy influence of the silent horror film The Golem, the decision was made to focus on the physicality and, well, horror of his Frankenstein character, or the creature. In the 1931 film, the creature doesn't speak, a huge departure from the source material. In fact, the creature's dialogue is possibly my favorite thing about the original story. So our image of the creature has become a big, scary-looking monster with no higher mental capacity or the ability to speak and reason. The reason for his existence is to murder.
There's gonna be dead people that we just murder.
Not. And he comes to life with that being the only motivation in his heart and mind. When we think of Frankenstein, we think of a pretty simple story. Mad scientist creates a monster by piecing together pieces of corpses and sending electricity through them. That monster then goes on a rampage of terror until he is finally destroyed. But the actual story is so much more. And it's one of the things that has me so excited about the upcoming film adaptation by Guillermo del Toro. Del Toro is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Pan's Labyrinth is my favorite movie of all time. And especially knowing that he's had a long-standing passion for the original Frankenstein and has shared his excitement to bring the story to the screen, he and Frankenstein seem like a match made in heaven. I mean, Del Toro is the reigning creature master, inventing monsters from the horrifying to the gentle, but always with understanding and usually great empathy. I don't think I can in good conscience say we're supposed to have empathy for the pale man. The film hasn't come out yet, so I can't comment on any specifics, but let's just say I was inspired to make this video after watching the trailer, and if what it promises holds up, we're in for a real treat. Side note, there have obviously been other film adaptations of Frankenstein over the years, most notably Kenneth Branagh's 1994 adaptation, which went so out of its way to declare its alleged faithfulness to the original that the actual movie was officially called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. My guess is that this was a response to Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Let's Get Back to the Original Dracula film, Bram Stoker's Dracula. That was the official title. Let's just say that while both films do dig into the source material in ways other films haven't, and are just all around pretty cool, I can't in good consciousness recommend either of them as true examples of the original stories. Coppola's adds a dramatic love triangle between Mina, Jonathan, and Dracula, which, while based in the backstory of Vlad the Impaler, who was thought to be a historical inspiration for Dracula, is so wide of the mark of the point of the original story, I don't quite know how they could actually use Bram Stoker's name in the title. And Branagh's Frankenstein does something similar, albeit subtler, by doing a left turn toward the end and creating a love triangle between Elizabeth, Victor, Frankenstein, and the creature. Nothing remotely close to it is anywhere in the novel. I mean, maybe there's some subtle hint, not so subtle hint, that the creature wishes someone loved him the way Elizabeth loves Victor, but that's completely different than how far they go in Branagh's film. Also, the creature in this version can't really be qualified physically as a monster, which contradicts how the creature is talked about in the film and, again, the source material. Far from appearing to be a mass conglomeration of body parts, many of which accentuate things like height, the creature in this film is just the corpse of an ordinary man with a few stitches and scars, which heal quite well over the course of the story. There's no reason this creature would be forever ostracized by the world. He looks no more terrifying than a rather attractive, if roguish, figure who's gotten into a few scrapes in his life. He might not be welcome in elite circles, but cast out from the affection of men, he is not. At least physically, which makes you need some real suspension of disbelief when he keeps talking about himself that way. I was introduced to the real story of Frankenstein when I saw a National Theatre live screening of Nick Dear's play adaptation, directed by Danny Boyle and featuring Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller alternating the roles of Victor Frankenstein and the creature. To this day, it's one of the best things I've ever seen, and I highly recommend it. Seriously, if you don't know about the National Theatre live screenings or online subscription, check it out ASAP. They do pro shots of the shows that come to the National Theatre and sometimes show them in movie theaters and also make them available online, and it's incredible and I'm very thankful for it. But it was seeing this Frankenstein and realizing that I'd never actually read the book that inspired me to get the novel and read it cover to cover. And boy, am I glad I did. As great as the story is, you actually gain even more from reading it when you know some background of how it was written and about the author. I think it's one of the smartest, most moving, and yes, terrifying stories I've ever read. And it was given to us by an 18-year-old girl, she was 19 when the book was published, named Mary Shelley, who, for all intents and purposes, invented the genre of science fiction. Mary Shelley, née Mary Wollstonecraft, was born in England in 1797. Her mother died shortly after giving birth to her, and in true Queen of the Gothic fashion, she was a Gothic girl if ever there was one. It's said that she lost her virginity on her mother's grave. Mary was close with her father, who was a famous, if controversial, author and philosopher of the time, who made sure that Mary was well educated. When she was 16, she met the famous poet Percy Shelley, and despite her father's disapproval, which was caused by their age difference, and, well, the fact that he was already married and had a child, she ran off with him. Percy did eventually actually marry Mary after the of Shelley's first wife, making Mary officially Mary Shelley. Soon after running off with Percy, Mary gave birth prematurely to their first child, who died 2 weeks later. The loss of her child had a deep impact on her and would have a huge impact on her writing. Mary was also living at a time when scientific revolution was everywhere. I say that in quotes because some revolutions were actually scientific and some not so much. For example, the powers of electricity, especially how they pertain to the human body, were just being discovered. There was a huge exhibition where electricity was shot into the cadaver of, I believe, a frog, making the frog's muscles contract. We know today that this is simply because electrical impulses cause muscle contraction in the body. It doesn't generate consciousness. But back then, they thought the frog had possibly temporarily come back to life. Because of this, there was much speculation as to whether electricity might be the key to reanimating the dead. The fact that Mary's story was based on something that could be true, if not now, but in the future, which she points out in the preface to the novel, is the establishment of a major trope of the genre she invented, science fiction, as opposed to science fantasy. Indeed, it's what sets it apart as its own unique genre. Related, slightly divergent path, many of the archetypes we now take for granted were created and established in Frankenstein. Victor is the blueprint for the mad scientist. His creature is the monster with a heart of gold who is outwardly ugly, while the rest of humanity is instead inwardly ugly, and usually turns on humanity itself as punishment for their cruelty. The story of how Mary, aged 18, came to write Frankenstein is infamous, but I think it's best to share the account in her own words. Mary Shelley, in her introduction to the 1831 revised edition of Frankenstein, well, that edition came out exactly 100 years before the film we were just speaking of, wrote this. The publishers of the standard novels, in selecting Frankenstein for one of their series, expressed a wish that I should furnish them with some account of the origin of the story. I am more willing to comply because I shall thus give a general answer to the question so very frequently asked me, how I, when a young girl, came to think of and dilate upon so very hideous an idea. In the summer of 1816, we, Mary, her husband Percy Shelley, and her sister, became the neighbors of Lord Byron. For those who don't know, Lord Byron is one of the most famous English poets of all time. But it proved a wet, ungenial summer, and incessant rain often confined us for days to the house. Some volumes of ghost stories fell into our hands. "We will each write a ghost story," said Lord Byron. I busied myself to think of a story to rival those which had excited us to this task. Many and long were the conversations between Lord Byron and Shelley, to which I was a devout but nearly silent listener. During one of these, various philosophical doctrines were discussed, and, among others, the nature of the principle of life, and whether there was any probability of its ever being discovered and communicated. They talked of the experiments of Dr. Darwin. I speak not of what the doctor really did or said that he did, but, as more to my purpose, of what was then spoken of as having been done by him, who preserved a piece of vermicelli in a glass case till by some extraordinary means it began to move with voluntary motion. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. This is tying back in with the whole electricity thing. That night, when I placed my head on my pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. My imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me, gifting the successive images that arose in my mind with a vividness far beyond the usual bounds of reverie. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out and then show signs of life. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. His success would terrify the artist. He would rush away from his odious handiwork, horror-stricken. He would hope that this thing would subside into dead matter, and that the silence of the grave would quench forever the transient existence of the hideous corpse which he had looked upon as the cradle of life. He sleeps, but he is awakened. He opens his eyes. Behold, the horrid thing stands at his bedside, opening his curtains and looking on him with yellow, watery, but speculative eyes. I had thought of a story. So, what is the real story of Frankenstein? Much like other Gothic novels, Frankenstein has a framing device centered around an audience surrogate who is relating the story he learned from a first-hand account directly to us. In the case of Frankenstein, that person is Captain Robert Walton, a young British explorer who is leading an expedition to the North Pole in order to try to discover some of the secrets and power that hide there, believing it holds the key to unlocking world-changing scientific discoveries. He is ambitious with the beginnings of a God complex and knows that his ambitions might cause him to never again see his loved ones back home. One day, he and the rest of his crew see a horrifying figure in the distance, a kind of man over 8 feet tall, driving a dog sled across the ice. Then, not too long after, they see another regular-sized man on another dog sled, apparently chasing the first man. This second man is nearly dead from exhaustion and hypothermia. Walton brings the man on board and nurses him back to health. Walton and the man, who Walton learns is named Victor Frankenstein, become friends. But when Frankenstein learns of Walton's ambitions, he says he must warn Walton. His very soul is at stake. And the only way he can truly warn Walton is by sharing his story, a story he wanted to take to the grave, of how he came to the Arctic in such a sad state, and who the terrifying figure was Walton saw before he rescued Frankenstein. Everything we learn is meant to be a word-for-word transcription of Frankenstein's story as told to Walton. We learn that Victor is the eldest son of a wealthy Genovese family who, in his youth, was obsessed with alchemy. When still a child, his parents adopted a young girl named Elizabeth, who from birth is a representative paragon of all that is good in the world, for the audience as well as the family. Victor and Elizabeth become instant friends and playmates, and when they become adults, get engaged, just in time for Victor's mother to die, leaving the whole family devastated. In mourning or not, Victor has to leave to start his studies at the University of Ingolstadt, Having moved on from alchemy, his interests now lie in the modern sciences, namely chemistry and electricity. But upon arriving at the university, he meets a professor that rekindles his interest in alchemy. Believing it may be possible to combine the aspirations of alchemy with modern science, he spends day and night trying to figure out the secret of creating life. Victor succeeds in his mission, using electricity and the secret of life, which he's discovered and we are never told what it is, to bring to life a horrifying humanoid creature made of body parts he's collected from the local graveyard. But the moment it comes to life, Victor is horrified. He runs away from his laboratory in disgust, and when he returns, the creature is gone. Victor becomes very sick and is nursed back to health by his best friend Clairville, who has just arrived at the university to begin his own studies. But just as Victor is getting better, he receives a letter telling him that his little brother William, and I mean little brother, William is a child, has been found dead, and that the Frankenstein's beloved servant, a young woman named Justine, has been accused of the crime because William's locket was found in her pocket after his death. On his way home for the funeral, Victor sees the creature in the distance and knows the creature was responsible for William's death. But when he gets home, despite Elizabeth's testimony that Justine could never have done such a horrible thing, Victor watches silently as Justine is falsely convicted and then executed for the murder. Eventually, Victor comes face to face with the creature, who, though monstrous in appearance, is actually, I think, one of the most beautifully articulate and surprisingly empathetic characters, let's say anti-heroes, in literature. Victor wants to kill him, but the creature makes Victor listen to his story, what's happened to him since the night of his creation and abandonment by Victor. For me, it's where the story really takes off. See, the creature is not born a monster. Though he is physically terrifying to look at, he comes into consciousness like any newborn baby, albeit with a fully mature body, not knowing how to speak, not understanding language, not fully in control of his body, not understanding basic concepts like light and dark, heat and cold, what hunger and thirst are. And his first experience is being rejected by his creator, his father. After being abandoned, he was forced out into the forest in order to try and find food and water. He quickly learned that humans found him frightening. Every time he tried to get help or to connect with someone, he was violently driven away. Eventually, he found a hovel attached to a small house. From there, he was able to observe a family while remaining hidden. The family is comprised of an adult brother and sister and their blind father, all of whom clearly love each other. This is the creature's first experience of what love is, and he longs to be like this family. He watches the family teach their language and history to a foreigner, and thereby learns how to speak, read, and write, and about the history of human societies. He finds a collection of books, most notably Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost, if you don't know, is a classic novel which is a poetic take on the fall of Satan and the creation of man from a Christian perspective. The creature identifies both with Adam and, more so, with Lucifer, feeling that he was also, in a way, cast out of heaven, being unloved by his creator and all humankind, and doomed to spend eternity alone. Though, if it were up to the creature, he would far prefer to be Adam. The creature discovering books that deeply inspire him is a parallel to Victor's discovery of books on alchemy in his childhood. But whereas Victor's books inspired him to desire mastery over things humans should never control, the creature's books inspired him toward love and noble thoughts. When he left Frankenstein's laboratory, the creature took some clothes that he found on the ground, notably a coat. In the pocket of the coat, he found Victor's diary. Now, being able to read, the creature learns his origin story and who his creator is. He begins to hate Victor for giving him such a horrific existence and abandoning him. The creature eventually learns the story of the family he's been observing. Apparently, they were a rich family living in Paris, but the brother helped a man escape from prison because he felt sorry for him, whereupon the government took the family's money and they were banished. The creature, feeling pity for them, begins secretly doing good deeds for them, gathering wood, repairing their cottage and garden, and doing various things to ease their poverty. The family wishes they knew who their kind benefactor was and are incredibly grateful. Whoever it is, they're like an angel to them. Wanting to be friends with the family and believing them to be good, the creature goes to talk to the father, who the creature hopes will listen to him because the man is blind. The man shows him kindness, but when his children return and see the creature, they violently drive him away because of his horrifying appearance. In direct opposition to the 1931 film, the creature then tries to save a girl from drowning. In the film, he drowns her, but is then shot by someone who thinks such a monstrosity could only have ill intent toward the girl. By now, the creature has been pushed to use a Wicked analogy, and
let all loss be agreed. I'm wicked through and through.
Point, for the most part. The creature walks to Geneva to confront Victor and ends up killing William, putting William's locket in Justine's pocket as revenge on his creator. The creature's point in telling all this to Victor is to make the case that Victor did wrong by him. Victor created him, then abandoned him to a world that hated him. From humanity, he has learned that he will forever be barred from love. He has learned hatred and violence and has had to adopt these things in order to survive. He was not... Victor is terrified of the creature, but even now, the creature, in a way, wants to reconcile. He knows he will be ostracized forever, and so asks Victor to make a female creature, as ugly as he is, to be his companion. Adam had Eve. God knew it was not good to be alone, he says. If Victor does this, the creature swears that they will live peacefully by themselves, and never bother anyone again. If he doesn't, the creature threatens to keep killing people. Victor ultimately agrees, but more because of the challenge it poses than out of compassion for his creation. Victor wonders if this time he could create a creature that is beautiful.
Look who wanted to come say hi! Look, it's Poppy! She came back to say hi. She has some things to say about... Okay, go forth!
Victor and his best friend 𝐼𝐸 go to a remote island in Scotland to establish a new laboratory. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, long concerned about Victor, is angry and scared that Victor keeps pushing her away. He all but disappeared at university, came back changed, paranoid and obsessive, and now he's going away to another country with no explanation of why. And they still haven't gotten married. It's worth noting that for both Victor and the creature, the determination to make a woman to be the creature's companion is a repetition of Victor's initial sin, and not in the way you might think. Here, it is framed in a different way that neither character has fully learned that you can't create life without accepting responsibility for it as a full and complete human being in and of itself. They are literally creating a new female life to fulfill the desires of her male creators. Mary Shelley and her mother were feminists, and it's worth pointing out here that not until the final moment are the potential female creature's feelings ever taken into account. What if she rejects the creature? What if she doesn't want to be his companion? What if she turns on him just as everyone else has? Victor is a hair's breadth away from finishing his new creation when he starts to have serious misgivings. And not really moral ones about her needs, but mainly about the fact that this new creation is female, and therefore she and the creature would be able to have children. He's horrified imagining what monstrosities these two creatures would create together, and that once they can reproduce, there would be no stopping them and this new race of monsters. At the last moment, he destroys his new creation and takes back his promise to the creature. The creature is devastated that he has now forever lost any chance of having love and companionship. The creature kills 𝐼𝐸, and Victor is arrested for the crime, though he is eventually released. The creature swears revenge on Victor, warning, "I will be with you on your wedding night." Victor flees back to Geneva, where he quickly marries Elizabeth, and the night of their wedding goes on the defensive as he's convinced the creature is planning on killing him. He sits up waiting with a gun all night, while Elizabeth still has no idea what's going on or why her husband is seemingly rejecting her. But it's not Victor the creature is after. While Victor lies in wait, the creature kills Elizabeth. Since his companion was taken from him, he will do the same to Victor. Victor's father dies of grief, and now everyone Victor ever loved is dead because of his creation. Victor vows revenge on the creature, eventually following him to the Arctic. Returning to our framing device, Victor warns Walton of the dangers of playing God, but not so much in the standard way we've come to think of that idea, i.e., it's not just about creating a monster you can't control, although that is part of it. Frankenstein warns of the dangers of the pride that causes one to want to play God, of our complete inability to understand and care for the things we create, and the tragedy of turning our back on what makes us human in the first place. One of the questions the piece explores is, if Victor wanted so badly to create new life, Why didn't he just have children with Elizabeth? What he wanted was more than the natural human desire to create. It was to master life and death, even if the only way to do so was hellish. Walton, shaken to his core by the meaning of Frankenstein's story, decides to abandon his journey and turn back. He now realizes that scientific discovery isn't worth losing your soul. Victor vows to stay and continue pursuing his creation, but in his weakened state, he dies. Before the ship can leave, the creature appears on board, but far from going on a murderous rampage, he instead mourns his father's death, telling Walton that he will burn himself on a pyre because he never wanted to be bad, and then leaves. The subtitle of Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. In ancient Greek mythology, Prometheus, against the will of the gods, gave fire to humans, thus allowing them to wildly progress in their development and have tremendous power. In a way, they became like gods. As punishment, Prometheus is chained to a rock by Zeus and cursed to have his liver eaten by birds every day, whereupon his liver would regrow just in time for the birds to devour it again. There's a great and famous quote from Jurassic Park.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
It's dangerous to put fire, and all it represents metaphorically, in the hands of beings who do things before ever even thinking about the consequences. It's a powerful moment in Frankenstein when the creature, newly created, learns that fire can both give warmth and hurt you. One should not have charge over or use fire, and again, all it represents metaphorically, unless they respect both sides of it and their limitations when it comes to controlling it. Some view Prometheus's actions as bringing power and equality to poor, put-upon primitive humans. Some that it was what allowed humans to cause so much suffering and destruction in the world in the first place. And that's what Frankenstein is looking at. Though it is easy to assume that Victor is the Prometheus of this story, it's important to note that he never actually shares his knowledge of how he created life. He discovers some secret other than electricity, which, as I said, we never learn. Some believe the real Prometheus of this story is the scientific method itself, something that brings mankind so much, but at what cost? And I would like to note here, when we're talking about the problems of the scientific method, in this story and what I'm trying to say, we're talking about it in the context of trying to play God. I'm not talking about it in terms of the fact that science and medicine has really helped mankind, about, vaccines. All of that is really, really good. I am not saying that science is wrong. I'm saying that trying to play God and using science to achieve diabolical methods is the thing we need to be wary of. Just a disclaimer. If you're going to watch an adaptation, at least of those currently out, Del Toro's is coming out very, very soon, but not yet, at least in the States, go see a National Theatre live screening of the Nick Dear play. My personal favorite casting combination is Benedict Cumberbatch as the creature, although both options are great. The play opens with the birth of the creature, which focuses on the creature's experience of coming into existence. And it is very much like a child being born in an adult's body. Think Poor Creatures if you're looking for a reference. Honestly, Poor Creatures has a lot more in common with Frankenstein than some alleged Frankenstein adaptations. The whole first section of the play follows the creature as he begins to learn about the world. To watch him figure out how to move, discover what rain and grass are, that fire can both give warmth and cause pain, what it feels like to have hunger satiated by food for the first time, is extraordinary and, for me, deeply moving. And that's all in the original text. If you're interested in a great adaptation, and I do mean adaptation in the loosest sense of the word, the TV show Penny Dreadful, which imagines a world where Gothic horror characters all coexist, has a very interesting interpretation of the creature, which is well worth checking out. One of the things this creature must wrestle with is the fact that before he was reanimated, he was a regular person and lived a life that he now has no memory of. What that life was, and who was a part of it, play an important part in his character development. It's an aspect the original novel doesn't delve into, probably partially because in the novel the creature is made from the body parts of many corpses, but the brain at least came from one person, I assume. And it's assumed in the novel that the creature has no memory of the former lives of any of the corpses that make up its body. Young Frankenstein sort of meets halfway in that area by having Igor, thanks to his clumsiness, provide the doctor with an abnormal, or abnormal brain, which is meant to account for the creature's homicidal tendencies. And let's be real, we need to give Mary Shelley credit for literally inventing science fiction. Shelley's contribution as a writer has been undervalued for far too long, going all the way back to when the book was first published. Originally, she published anonymously. Literally, the first edition of Frankenstein listed the author as anonymous. She then published under the pseudonyms Mrs. Caroline Bernard, or Bernard in the British pronunciation, and then simply Mary S. This was both to avoid being associated with her radical philosopher father and gain some distance from her complex family's background and reputation, and allow her work to be judged on its own merits, as well as, one can assume, to separate her writing career from that of her incredibly famous poet husband. In fact, when she was finally revealed as the real author, many assumed that her husband had actually written it, since, obviously, a young woman could never have created something so brilliant, and come on, he was a famous writer. That was sarcasm, by the way. Fortunately, her husband was incredibly supportive of her work, and both of them were vocal about the fact that he didn't write anything in Frankenstein. And she didn't just create a great book. She launched a new genre. A while back, I'm not sure of the date, the New York Times Books account, I think on Twitter or X, posted, "With Jules Verne and the publisher Hugo Gernsback, H.G. Wells invented the genre of science fiction," with a link to an article about the topic. 𝐸𝐵 Nyang, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, replied, "When Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in 1818, aged 19, neither Jules Verne nor Wells were born yet. Allan Poe was 9. A teenage girl wrote what is still considered today the first science fiction novel. This article continues the long tradition of erasing her." If, like me, you like complex, vital, culturally urgent stories, Frankenstein is for you. If you like science fiction and want to get to its root and heart, it's for you. If you're interested in important literary works by women, or women who changed the artistic and, I would argue, scientific landscape, it's for you. If you like books just by good authors regardless of gender, it's for you. If you like horror, it's for you. If you like beautiful language and complex characters, it's for you. If you like stories that will make you think and feel long after they're over, it's for you. I love how the story feels so relevant, how whoever you are, you will relate to the characters, and how it captures a true horror story. Not just something meant to give you some jump scares, but that will make you question your own heart and the state of humanity. There are a lot of old books and stories that we think we know through cultural osmosis, and so don't feel a necessity to investigate them or experience them firsthand. But I've learned that classics, true classics, are classics for a reason. And it's not because a bunch of stuffy professors decided that a book was important. It's because it deeply affected the people who first read it, and they wanted to keep reading and sharing it. That may not always be true of new works dubbed classics by the powers that be, but if it's been around, if it's been a classic for a while, that's because it's good. Don't miss out on experiencing it for yourself. I love the tagline for Del Toro's adaptation. "Only monsters play God." The true villain of Frankenstein, I think, is Frankenstein, not the creature. Not to say that the creature is a good person by the end of the story. He is responsible for some horrific atrocities, but the story is framed that the creature was led to those things because of his circumstances, which is still not an excuse. But on the opposite side, Victor chose evil because he wanted something he should never have aspired to, in antithesis to the wonderful circumstances he'd always existed in. There's a quote from Thomas More's Utopia.
"If you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners corrupted from infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, what else is to be concluded, sire, but that you first make thieves and then punish them?"
Not that anyone can escape responsibility for horrible actions by citing their awful circumstances, but within reason, this quote is, in a way, a perfect description of the creature's situation. By contrast, Mary Shelley goes out of her way to make it abundantly clear that Victor grew up in a fairy tale of a loving home. He had 2 parents who adored him, money and resources so he never wanted for anything, a dear best friend, the love of his life, freedom to learn, and, with the exception of his father disapproving of alchemy, which, let's agree, was warranted, to pursue his passions. And yet Victor, while he does have redeeming qualities, is obsessive, selfish, power-mad, and cruel. The creature kills William after being tormented and abused all his life in a desperate, if obviously misguided, attempt to get the only thing that might allow peace and love into his life, and some semblance of justice. Victor watches his childhood friend, a young, innocent woman who has spent her whole life caring for and serving Victor and his family, be executed for a crime he knows she didn't commit in an idiotic attempt to keep people from knowing, at least for the moment, what he had been up to at university, knowing that by withholding the truth, he was also putting more lives at risk. Though he felt guilty about it, and according to the book is even driven to thoughts, Victor still lets an innocent girl, and I do mean girl, be killed so people wouldn't be mad at him and he wouldn't have to be publicly ashamed of defiling the laws of nature. Frankenstein has devolved in our collective consciousness to a standard horror story about unleashing a monster on the world. What we think of as scary in the story is the monster, the fear of his rampage, the same as fear of, say, a serial killer. Don't read the Necronomicon because you'll unleash a demon. Don't reanimate the dead because you might create a murderer. But as frightening as that is, that's not what's really scary about the story. What's truly frightening is so much worse than that. In chapter 10, the creature says to Victor when asking Victor to create him a companion, "Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed." We can debate the misdeed in another video, but I digress. "Everywhere I see bliss from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous." That's just some of the poetic language the creature uses in the story. And most films have taken that voice away and made him silent, which I think is important. I think the book is written to inspire empathy with the creature more than any other character in the story. And the thing that is the most frightening is, in a way, humanity itself. Is it not terrifying to face the horrific things about us as a species, as individuals, and confront the fact that we must inevitably pass on our worst traits to our creations as well as our best? It's scary to identify with the creature, to see evil in Victor, to want him brought to justice and have the creature finally find peace, only to realize, ultimately, we're not the creature. We're Victor. And that means that all those things we felt about him, that we see in him, we have to see in ourselves. We must tame the monster in us. Otherwise, we will create the same horror he has, unleash the same pain. Frankenstein sees the horror he's created, a manifestation of the horrors inside himself, and runs away. His creature, on the other hand, by nature of his very existence, can never look away. Victor's inward corruption is made physically manifest in the creature, and the creature's physical corruption, thrown into a world of judgment and cruelty, makes him inwardly corrupt too. It's a horrific, vicious cycle, the central point of which is we can't escape if we insist on looking away or pretending it's not there. When Victor returns to his laboratory and sees that the creature has vanished, he doesn't go after him. Instead, he goes into denial, convincing himself that the creature must have died. Indeed, the creature must, at least according to the story and the creature's view, kill Victor's brother in order to finally shake him out of denial. One of the reasons I think Young Frankenstein is so funny is it highlights just how clueless and egotistical Frankenstein is.
That's Frankenstein.
This Frankenstein doesn't have a clue what he's doing or how to be responsible with the power at his disposal. The townspeople's inability to look past someone's exterior is also hilariously mocked, and like the original, I think we have a lot of empathy for the creature. I mean, in Young Frankenstein, the creature has an abnormal brain and is just trying to do the best with what he's given. And look how hard he worked at tap dancing.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
He doesn't even even drown the girl out of malicious intent. They're playing the he loves me not flower game, and they're out of petals, and he needs something to throw in. So he throws her in. Again, it's like an 8-month-old with the body of a full, powerful human adult. But the thing that ultimately unites Victor and the creature, what makes them at the end of the day the same, is their mutual descent into an eternal, all-consuming, obsessive desire for vengeance. The same thing that characterizes Satan in the creature's much-beloved Paradise Lost. Ultimately, Victor and the creature become two sides of the same coin, the unrepentant devil who desires destruction at all costs. As the creature says, evil thenceforth became my good. I think about developments in AI, this creation that's allegedly supposed to benevolently solve so many problems for humanity, but when you look at the execution in how it actually behaves, our worst sins keep cropping up in it. I've read studies of AI exhibiting racism, sexism, and flat-out lying constantly. Is that the AI's fault? No. Even though the programmers may not have intended it, it's ours. It reveals our nature, and it forces us to ask, what will happen if we put our true nature, good and bad, in a form that has unlimited power, knowledge, and control? And remember, knowledge is not the same thing as understanding or positive choice. Victor Frankenstein can attest to that. And that's without even taking into account what we're willing to do to create this AI creature in the first place. AI creation involves an enormous amount of specifically drinkable water usage. It's throwing countries into drought. It's devastating ecosystems. But like Victor, many have the feeling that the creation is worth literally any cost. We maybe need to take a step back and look at that a second time. This is a video for another day, but there's a similar problem with misreading Jekyll and Hyde. We've come to think of that story as that of a good man trying to separate evil from himself and ending up simply dividing himself into a good and evil side. That's not what the original story is about. In the original, Jekyll is described as a problematic man, not a saint, who stumbled into a respectable life and profession. The potion he invents doesn't turn him into another person. It simply disguises his appearance so that he can go out in the world and do what he really wants to do without suffering the consequences. Jekyll's journals were written in large part when he was disguised as Hyde, and they always stay in the first person. I did everything I did, whether I appeared as Jekyll or Hyde. So much of Gothic literature is about confronting the monster in ourselves and what that unleashes on the world. As time's gone by, that's been reduced to external monsters are scary and we need to kill them. And I think that while there's certainly relevance in that, it is a dangerous, oversimplified message, especially for the world we're living in today. So go check out Frankenstein. It's really good. And I hope Del Toro's adaptation turns out to be all it promises. Go check it out and let me know what you think.